As I've said many times, I was incredibly enamored with arcade games as a kid. I would stand mesmerized at the soft glowing screens of the cabinets of my youth. I didn't always have the money to play what I wanted when I wanted, so I often took great pleasure in watching what was called the attract screens. They were sort of the opening cinemas of the arcade world. They were also called the game over mode or even the demo mode. Early on, they were little more than gameplay snippets to grab your attention, but as time went on and technology improved, they got longer, more cinematic, and very much worth watching. This was particularly true once polygon games became the dominant game type, and Sega really knew how to entertain you, even if you didn't have a penny to your name. While the Model 1 and Model 2 were impressive in their own right, I want to focus on the Sega Model 3 here. By the time it launched in arcades in 1996, Sega really had a handle on making you want to play their titles when you saw them. Whether it was just showing you how to play the game, telling you part of a story, or just putting up a simple leaderboard, I could stand and watch these games tirelessly. Virtua Fighter had been on the Model 1 and Model 2 already, but the power of the Model 3 really made its opening stand out. I know it's not the most popular game in the series, and it's never had a 100% accurate home version, but you still have to appreciate these models and backdrops for a 1996 3D game. The textures are beautiful, and the fine details across the clothing and the environment is amazing. It really wasn't anything more than a brief introduction to each of the fighters' styles, yet it carried with it a cinematic quality that stayed true to the series. There are actually two different openings to Virtua Fighter 3 as well. You have the original release in 1996, and you have the Team Battle upgrade that came in 1997. I loved every single Virtua Fighter opening, and this one here was yet another one I could watch 100 times. Scud Race was released in 1996 and was also called Sega GT. Like other Sega 3D racers at the time, its attract screen was mainly just cinematic camera angles of racing on the various tracks. But Scud Race was such an incredibly good-looking game. These were nothing short of mesmerizing. Huge cliffs with majestic waterfalls, city-sized aquariums with swimming dolphins, and tons of great-looking car models were featured. It was one of the earliest examples of just how powerful the Model 3 actually was, and it even got an update the following year that added some new modes and a brand new track just for kids. I wouldn't see that update until many years later because it was Japanese only, but that just meant there was more to discover with this unbelievable title. Sega expanded on its Jurassic Park arcade games with The Lost World in 1997. The attract screen was nothing more than a short series of models in different situations. The main one was the introduction of the T-Rex, and others were just different dinosaurs in different scenes. I still love the way this game looked, and it continued the fine tradition of multiplayer sit-down titles from Sega. Even though I wasn't a soccer fan in my youth, I still ogled the Model 3 edition of Virtua Striker 2. These games were always lookers, and this one was no exception. I mean, consider that this is 1997, and while we were at home messing around with the likes of the Saturn, Nintendo 64, and PlayStation, this is the kind of stuff that Sega was dropping in the arcade. The player models, the stadiums, the crowd, the details, it all was just eye-popping at the time. Seeing this made me wish Sega would have made a Model 3 version of Joe Montana football for the American market. Virtua Striker 2 would see numerous upgrades in the arcades as well, each with various touches to the intro. The graphics also got better with each update, improving sideline detail in the models quite a bit. If there is ever a Model 3 compilation made, Sega needs to make sure this game is in it.
Free kick. Goal kick.
"1997 also gave us Harley-Davidson and LA Riders. This open-world game was Sega's first real attempt at the style, allowing you to drive all over the place at will. The opening screen of this one was showing off a Harley, clad in chrome, and then shooting off into a cinematic tour of the racing area. Various bike models were featured here as it rotated through the openings. This was always one of Sega's most unique games at the time, getting rid of the linear racing and taking on more of an exploratory tone. The sit-down deluxe bike was something to behold, and I always wanted to play it at home. The license would likely make that tough these days, but this is still very much worth taking for a spin if you happen to find one. Virtua Fighter wasn't the only Sega fighter to get the Model 3 treatment, as we also saw Fighting Vipers 2 in 1998. The opening to this one is a bunch of action shots of the fighting cast. The emulation I'm using here has some texture problems, but the overall tone and quality is mostly intact. Fighting Vipers 2 was a really nice looking title with great 3D models, and the close-ups here really let you know just how strong the Model 3 was at doing this kind of thing. When the battles were featured in the attract screen, it would pull the camera back and show off the cages and the 3D backgrounds as well. This was quite rare in the US, so if you find one, be sure to plant yourself down and soak up the beautiful opening on the original hardware. Sega Rally 2 showed up in 1998 as well, and it had some pretty damn big shoes to fill. The original was one of my favorite racing games of all time, and right off the bat, the opening screens had me salivating to play it. I mean, it was Sega freaking Rally with better textures, better car models, and better effects like headlights and dirty cars. Like the original, each track had a cinematic attract screen with dynamic camera angles and lots of set pieces in view. The Dreamcast version may have been pared back, but the Model 3 edition was nothing short of breathtaking. It's a shame this version remains locked away from so many that love the original. Virtual Lawn Oratorio Tangram was another 1998 release for the Model 3. This one had an opening that really focused on the models of the mechs, and let you appreciate just how incredible this game looked. These are some of the best mech designs of all time, flawlessly animated. They are colorful and varied, and that silky smooth performance just brought it all together with incredible style. It even taught you how to play it, something that would have helped many players if only they had spent a few minutes paying attention to it. Daytona USA 2 Battle on the Edge was a huge release in 1998. It was the sequel to Daytona USA, one of the most profitable arcade cabinets ever made. Could the Model 3 do it justice? You knew as soon as you saw that attract screen running that this was not just another racing game. Not only did it give you some great action shots of the racing, but it also showed off what was nothing short of its cutting-edge visuals. This was the kind of stuff that instantly made you want to part with your money, so you could get a taste of its racing mayhem. It cycled through each track, giving you an idea of what you'd be facing and how great everything looked. Shortly after this one, Sega released an update called Daytona USA 2 Power Edition, which had an even more cinematic opening. It's another one that needs a home port, so fans of the original can see just how great this game turned out. LA Machineguns was a direct sequel to Gunblade New York and was released in 1998. Like the first game in this series, it opens up with terrorists attacking the city and you deploying to stop them. From there, it's just a show-off of gameplay and leaderboards, but it gives you a great idea of how this one looks and plays. This and Gunblade New York are two of the best two-player gun games I've ever played in the arcade. The giant machine guns that recoiled added a ton of charm, and they both were graphical showpieces for their time. If you have a Wii, you can get them both in one package. Star Wars Trilogy Arcade was yet another 1998 release for the Model 3, and it was worth watching no matter what was going on. Aside from some cool cinematics showing off some of the battles and set pieces, it also had the full story crawl from Episode 4 and the opening shots of the ships. There was also the final battle with Darth Vader, though its impact here is lessened quite a bit because I could not get the lightsabers to display properly. Still, this was a beautiful game, and with those visuals and that soundtrack blasting out, it was bound to catch the attention to all who passed by. When it comes to weird Sega games, you don't get any more stranger than the Ocean Hunter. I had no idea what it was back then, but the attract screen does a great job of telling you its story. Each scene is a giant sea creature wreaking havoc on ships and divers, and your job, of course, is to hunt down these aquatic beasts and stop their reigns of terror. Think of this one as a Virtua Cop underwater, and the power of the Model 3 is on full display. After you get the snippets of the creatures, it also shows you some gameplay, so you know exactly what to expect when you press the start button. It's another one that you just have to play on original hardware to appreciate.
Sharks gather around monsters seeking human flesh.
While Sega never made a dedicated arcade version of Streets of Rage, they did create Spikeout, a 4-player 3D beat-em-up released in 1998. The opening to this one was just our heroes beating the hell out of a group of enemies. It was nothing special, and the only other thing worth mentioning was the short demo explaining the combo system. However, in 1999, Sega updated this game with Spikeout Final Edition, which saw a big change to the opening attract screen. Now you get a much more cinematic introduction in addition to the beatdowns of the first. It was a good showpiece of what to expect from the game, and still looks nice today. These have never actually been brought home in their original forms, something Sega really needs to work on. Our final game is 1999's Emergency Call Ambulance. This was essentially a more serious version of Crazy Taxi. Your job is to drive an ambulance through a busy city trying to get a badly injured person to the hospital. The opening to this one is incredible, not only in the way it showcases the game's visuals, but also in the way it creates a sense of urgency. You feel real stress watching your virtual patient fighting for his life, all while the hectic city traffic goes on like it's out to stop you at every turn. The flybys of the ambulance racing through the city look great and has an almost TV show opening quality to it. Model 3 games could grab your attention just on visual fidelity alone, but this one gets you with its unique hook as well. So there we are guys, some of my favorite Model 3 openings, attract screens, and cinematics. These were the very first things you saw of a game back then, wondering if they were worth the high price of admission. Sega did a great job making sure to create something that made you want to play it, often a mix of visual pizzazz and booming sound to keep your attention. After seeing the bold and beautiful tracks in Daytona 2, or watching those magnificent mechs in Virtual On, how could you walk away without at least trying them? You may notice in my videos that I use the attract or demo modes in home and arcade games quite frequently, and that's because I found them so appealing in my youth. It wasn't always about jumping into a game the moment you found it. Sometimes part of the experience was just sitting back and soaking up all the game had to offer for free first. You regularly saw things you didn't see in the actual game, like camera views, locations, story snippets, and even music. It was all part of the great experience an arcade game could offer, and I sure am glad I was around to see it. I'm Sega Lord X, thank you guys for watching, and I will catch you next time.